I need to update the thumbnail. It says Saturday, but the phone number is correct. If you want to call in, really any topics, there's quite a lot to talk about. Lone furry shooters are the new thing. We've been talking about noise to signal in Trutherville and what to do about it. This morning we were talking about mind viruses, and my phone overheated, which surprised me because it's like 48 degrees out, but I was in the sun, and I won't do that again. I need to have some kind of a box with maybe some kind of, I guess maybe one of those coolers where you freeze it overnight. Anyway, today is it only the 19th? Okay, the 19th of November, 2025. Okay, so it's been about a month. A lot has happened, honestly. It feels like 3 months. We've had the Dick Cheney death, 9/11 crash, a lot of stuff building up with the CK thing, and the whole thing's manufactured. It shows you how utterly deceived the masses are, and this includes the truthers. They're so deceived to where they do see this as like an ongoing real story between Candace Owens and her various conspiracy theories and TPUSA trying to counter her conspiracies. No, they're manufacturing these conspiracies. It's just, at this point, it's part of the mass media infrastructure. And I'm noticing more people are picking up on this fact. You're meant to react. The Pied Piper of Trutherville, Candace Owens says something, and you're supposed to just react. But in the last few weeks, maybe months, actually this is an ongoing thing, a number of people have suggested, well, maybe you're distracted. Like you're paying too much attention to the fake stuff. Get outraged and get mad at the government or whatever. And I've always said, no, I think you're the ones who are distracted. And I gave this some thought, and I put it in the last newsletter. Just the notion here that a lot of people think their job is to call out the fake things and say, don't get distracted. It's not worth your attention. And I've gone against the grain here, and I've said, no, these things that are glitches in the matrix, you're supposed to give your attention to. And they'll say, oh, well, this is just you getting distracted into looking into these things. Well, no, actually, no. It's only a distraction if you don't know what to do with it. And for the most part, what Trutherville has done is they have noticed these things as puzzle pieces. And these puzzle pieces get looked at and then casually dismissed when another puzzle piece is found. And they never really sweep up the pile of puzzle pieces in the past. They don't see these things as connected. This is what they're missing. And what we have done is we have systematized the way that we categorize these events, how we analyze them, but we have been putting the puzzle pieces together. And they're part of a cohesive whole. They're interrelated. The commonalities between them matter because you're looking at something formulaic. So everything about CK mirrors JFK, as well as the creation of this anti-media or counter-media conspiracy constituent as a new demographic to be triangulated against by the mainstream. So they can say, oh, you better believe you don't want to be like one of those people. You don't want to be a flat earther, tinfoil hatter. So Candace Owens is there to help negatively brand the counter media or anti-media, the people who are against mainstream. They've got to be made to look ridiculous, reprehensible, cold, and shallow, and greedy, and grifty. And she checks all those boxes from a mainstream perspective, because here she is basically claiming Erica Kirk killed her husband, which, to be honest and fair, that's a completely reasonable conclusion from a mainstream or alternative perspective if you look at the event as even slightly shady, which obviously it is. But I'm saying it's a manufactured perception. The leather pants hugging J.D. Vance, these are all part of the overall messaging. And again, it completely comports with the parallel characters in Heads of State / Snake Eyes and The Tempest. But if you're only looking at these individual events in isolation, the individual puzzle pieces, and discarding them and not putting them together, you won't see the entire model. And this is where what we do really differs from conventional truther channels. And those who might say we are distracted, I'm saying that it's quite the opposite. That as long as you're engaged in each psyop as though it's a novel thing and it might be real, you're distracted. I think we know enough now to proceed off of what we know. And when it comes to pretty much any of these things now, we are plugging them into the bigger picture. King Ravana says, J.D. Vance's eyes are on lots of pound puppy toys. Yeah, he's memed a lot. I haven't been giving them a lot of attention. His name confuses me. It was like David Bowman, and then it became James something, and then J.D. Vance. David Bowman, by the way, is the main character in 2001 Space Odyssey, the guy who talks to HAL 9000. Anyway, what makes what we do different from usual truthers is they're still caught up in the daily events, in the drama. They're still thinking like, oh, Candace Owens reputable, and so is Tucker Carlson. I'm like, are you kidding me? These people believe in demons. And I'm not saying demons aren't real, but I'm saying they talk about demons as though these things are physical things with preposterous claims. Like Tucker says, I was attacked by a demon. It scratched my back. I left blood on the sheets. And then Candace Owens says that Elon Musk sacrifices children to put demons into Grok. Like, okay, obviously this is absurd. And it says something about their target audience. But the people who follow these characters are still caught up in the drama. They don't realize that these are just performances by provocateurs. And it's easy to get distracted with politics as well. But what I'm saying is that if we're right about this being the true structure of media and purpose, we're talking about long-term engineering of history itself, implementing a pre-scripted historic narrative. If this is how it really is, and I say it is, but it suggests quite a lot about the role of politics, which isn't really a bad thing. It means it's a waste of your bandwidth, for one, that it's like World Wrestling Entertainment. So that's not bad. The bad part is it suggests that we are completely powerless and essentially like patients in an open air asylum. And we're in Westworld, disconnected from the reality of things, achieved solely through worldview warfare. So there's that angle. I'm not blackpilling it, but I'm just pointing out that this has deep implications for the real world versus the worldview that we have. Like Truman Show might not just be a science fiction comedy, but it might actually be what we live in. And this isn't that far-fetched. If you've ever studied or been in cults, like on a microcosm, it's the same thing. So I'm just suggesting that we live in a cult of billions, the state church and its worldview. And by the way, Elon Musk was saying today that they're going to be able to eliminate poverty. He said poverty is an engineering problem, but they're going to eliminate it with AI. And that's like just a few years away. So I'm not really pessimistic anymore. Like I'm totally not stressed out, and I should be. If you described where I'd be right now to me 6 months ago, I would have been in panic mode. I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be stocking groceries at Walmart and doing whatever jobs I could just to prevent this outcome. But now I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, I had a completely different take on things. Like I'm stress free as it is. And I do feel like things are improving. Not that I'm thinking Elon Musk is a savior. I'm just saying it's a truism that there are certain advances that are happening that are only going to make things better. Things aren't getting worse, is my point. which goes against the grain in Trutherville, where the sky is falling in so many different ways, where everything's unstable and we're always about to die, and the technocrats are coming to get us, or the AI, or the demons, or the Antifa. Like, how many scenarios have they invented? And that's one of the main differences between the real world and the Truman Show internalizable simulation they hand to you. They give you this operating system, and you put that on, and now you've got all these threats everywhere. And it's not real situational awareness. You know, people think they're just gaining situational awareness by watching the news. No, it's not informing you, it's conforming you. And their entire paradigm is based on superstitions. It's not werewolves and vampires out there at night, but they're similar or analogous threats they invent that are just as much superstitions. The correct term is hyperstition, because we're in a hyper reality, a place where the fiction and the real have been merged. Again, it's very much like a religion or any kind of, it's more noticeable in cults when you're talking about a divergent worldview that still overlaps enough with the mainstream that you can coexist, but you see them and you know that they're in a different world. I mean, I've met Moonies and Scientologists and Mormons. I mean, I've met them all. And you can tell whether the worldviews split up a little bit, whether there's a divergence. JJ Steen Graphic says, keep on laughing. We'll be out of gas by 1979. Yeah. Like Mad Max is always this doomsday scenario. We're going to run out of gas. It's all based on perceptions of scarcity, scarcity and competition over it. Joined by the Black Hand Side, King Ravana, David Hazel. Mark Foley says, now they're trying to push the idea that AI tech is bad for Gaia. It uses too many servers. Yeah, I was talking to a person the other day about this. I was talking about AI in particular, and the various use cases, how I've made use of it for editing, for art, for ideas. And I was just describing the myriad of ways that I use AI all the time. And someone said, I think it was like, well, every time you generate an AI image, I'm just worried about the water. I'm like, what? Yeah, the water it uses. It's like it uses 8 ounces of water for every crappy rendering that you output. So I was kind of getting guilt tripped over making digital art because of its environmental impact. But of course, I'm not going to rock the boat there. So I'm just like, yeah, I'll try to be more mindful of that. I'll stick to my pencil and paper. No, I didn't completely cow to it, but I kind of agreed. I said, well, that is a huge problem. Nobody foresaw the environmental cost of this. I'm scared to disagree with environmentalists. They're almost as scary as chemtrailers, but you don't really see chemtrail people in the wild. They're inside hiding from the chemtrails, talking about it on Twitter. I can't go outside today because those lines in the sky. But the climate change people are everywhere. It's pervasive. And they're the same people who were cheering for the death of Charlie Kirk. So also consider that. When you go against these people, even though the Kirk thing was probably a squib, if you go against the hardcore leftists, they will want to Charlie Kirk you for real. They may not do it, but if somebody does it, they will laugh at you as the blood gushes out. But yes, they said this before also with the idea that AI is bad for Gaia. They said the same thing with Bitcoin. And you know who agreed with them? Elon Musk. He's like saving free speech. Meanwhile, he's completely capitulating to the eco-fascist left. I don't know what you call it. Eco-tyranny, but whatever. He's part of it. And he never, this is another thing too. He gets too much credit. He's like, I got to fight the woke mind virus. And he views his takeover of Twitter, turning it into X, as fighting the woke mind virus. What's deceptive about this is the woke mind virus is kind of a misnomer. There's the woke left mind virus, but there's also a woke right mind virus. And so he kicked one out and opened the doors to the other. Yeah, AI, too much electricity. Yeah, I've heard all this stuff. Here's what I really think. I think if they can, because this is something that's pretty much unlimited. It's opened the doors for a lot of people to engage in, creativity far outside of their skills and abilities. I mean, it's really quite a leveler of many playing fields. And I think what they want to do is lay the groundwork, like they did for Twitter. Oh, you can only scroll through 6,000 tweets a day. Remember that? Just wait until they say you can only walk 10,000 steps a day to save Gaia. So I think they're just trying to find a way to get us to pay more taxes to save the planet, basically. I'm just saying it's another scam. Anything they can rate limit and convince you that it needs to be rate limited, they're going to rate limit. I happen to be, when it comes to climate change, I'm something of an accelerationist. It's like if we're going to break the planet, we're going to break it. And the sooner that we test it, the sooner we can find out its weak spots and fix those. Like, let's give it a stress test. Let's give Gaia a stress test and just meme like you don't care. All right, continuing. Now oh yeah, that's right. We were talking about lone furry shooters. So I was looking at this closely because now all these shooters are suddenly furries. And the images that I'm seeing show them with these big wolf heads. And I think this is straight just a reference to the lone wolf shooter, which is sort of a trope, but it's like done in a comical way. So I don't know what's happened. Have we gone from like a horror to a tragic comedy? Like, how has this world changed? But because the script writers, the engineers of our history, they inculcate jokes and irony into this thing all the time. But who saw this coming? I'm also making a point that we need to get rid of the noise. And yesterday I was talking about the calendar people. So here's an example. There's a calendar guy named Joseph Unpronounceable. I don't know what his last name is. I think its gematria value is 274. He's one of these gematria types, and I'm not knocking it, but I am saying this. What they're coming up with is preposterous. He says Elon Musk was 16,606 days old when he first went to the White House. So that's posted as like a meaningful tweet or a meaningful breakdown. Musk was 16,606. Well, what makes that number special? And what they're doing here is they're ascribing significance to number combinations that have sixes in them, because the Bible, when you get down to it, it's really incoherent. It falls apart. But this is their methodology. And what they'll do is they'll formulate all these connections and they'll find stuff that fits. And you would call this, and I think they're using AI to do it because I tried it out myself. You would call this the sharpshooter fallacy. And they ignore the misses, they find the hits, and then draw targets. So they put this up there as evidence of something. That Musk shows up at the White House, 16,606 days. I mean, what we're looking at here, though, is noise. Noise in the sense of you couldn't really make this a logical correlation, like a direct one, like we can with the movie Mountainhead and Musk, or the movie series, The Madness and Musk, and the similarities in the scripts and the world stage character. Like, yeah, we're making some direct correlations. But these people who are churning out a lot of content with these numbers are basing it on the false premise that these numbers mean something. So again, what does 16,606 mean? But then I've been looking closer at it. I'm thinking, okay, what are their methods? Their methods are using gematria and Kabbalistic numerology. They even have a satanic gematria calculator. I didn't know the Satanists were into this, but what they're doing is they're creating a scenario where it could not possibly have been organized and perpetrated by man. Like it's like unthinkable to imagine that there was a planned meeting that was barely worth a headline 16,606 days before. Like, if you have that much control, why wouldn't you just do 16,666? Like, why would you have any misses at all? But my point of it is, the people who are pointing these things out are adding a lot of noise, and the people looking at these things are wrongfully interpreting these connections, which are real, as meaningful or intentional connections. Now, the reason for pointing this out, however, is that we're in the process here of both quarantining and recruiting. Like, we're reaching into Trutherville for those who are following a lot of these channels that I think are plants. People who should be analyzing the metascript and analyzing psyops critically are falling into the traps of mysticism and confusion. And we're going to dispel that. There's enough fog. We're in the fog of Psywar. People are confused. And I think I made this point yesterday, that there's no excuse for saying, I don't know if it's real or fake. If you're saying that, all you're basically saying is, I'm confused. I can't tell what's real and what's not real. And you can say that. You can have that position. Like, I'm fundamentally confused about reality. Then all you're saying is the media got you. They rendered you incapable of discernment. So now what's your authority? If it's not your own mind, what's the authority that tells you that something is real or not? If you can't take a firm position, it doesn't mean you're open-minded. It means you're afraid of being proven wrong. And to be open-minded is to be open to being wrong. And what I'm saying is that you should be unequivocal about these news events. Either you don't believe it for the following 5 reasons, or you believe it for the following 5 reasons. This ambiguity being passed off as open-mindedness is farcical. So we can move past that as well. And the reason why we want to stand on certainty is that I've noticed a lot of blowback. People are saying, how can you be so certain? I'm like, why are you so uncertain? Like, should we expect to be walking around in a state of uncertainty, incapable of discerning what's going on based on known patterns with a predictable model? I mean, at this point, we know what we're looking at. So there's no point in pretending not to, or waiting for approval from a big channel to proceed on the information that we have. And I point this out because if you're cutting edge, if you're ahead of the trends, the people who aren't there yet will naturally oppose you, or at least dismiss what you're doing and trying to bring you back into the fold. Like, you're doing it wrong, you're too, and I'm like, look, we're the only ones with the hyper focus on not just media fakery, but predictive concurrent programming elements. And as such, what we're doing, I think, is justified in existing as it is. I see no reason to merge with the alt media muck, or to conform to appease what? A larger group of people who are confused or ambiguous or who still fall for things. Charming Anarchist says, the biggest mistake we can make is to assume we, the sheep, are the intended audience of the media. That's interesting. I mean, I think its primary purpose is conforming. It's not like, oh, we got to inform people so they have the best information to make the best, clearest decisions. That's not really the case at all. It's a relationship. It's a power thing. It's like they tell you what's going on, you believe it. It's not really like you can question it without being impugned. The relationship is more like pundit to believer. And the believers are automatically going to trust the pundit. There's no scrutiny. You don't go to church and say, do I trust the priest? No, you go to the church because you like the priest. And so most people are passive receptacles when it comes to propaganda and staged events. But another step further that we have taken this is what we're really looking at with PSYOPs aren't PR stunts to influence the next news cycle or a particular agenda. No, these are historical events. And these historical events, as we look at our history books and look at the world as we are collectively agreeing it to being today, you can see the significant ones that brought us to where we are. And these significant historical events that shape not just national, but like, quote, global news and our collective paradigm are by and large staged and fake, provably so. That's what we're talking about. And then you get into the timelines that would be necessary for this to be true. And you look at the corresponding artifacts and entertainment and, you know, the preemptive or foreshadowing stuff. And it's like, okay, you can kind of see how they create stories to build onto their manufactured history, how they use product placement with these scenarios and characters years in advance, introducing them, conditioning us to these things, so that when the staged historical event is acted out in front of us on the news, we see it as inevitable. It was bound to occur. There's buildup to make it seem believable. And that's why we look at the buildup of ideas and messaging pumped out at any given moment as an indicator of what's to come. We're not making loose predictions with gematria calculators. We're looking at the pattern of staged historic events preceded by entertainment media saturation. And it's not just limited to entertainment. It's pretty much any kind of platform, any conduit for propaganda will be used and compromised. What's up, Ted Stryker? Thanks for joining. Phones are open if you have any comments. So what I'm making the case for here is that despite the perception by some that we're hyper-focused on something and we're distracted, I'm saying we're the only ones who are focused where it matters. Because I'm not being facetious when I say that the only real conspiracy is our manufactured history and progress. It's an ongoing, successful one. And all the other conspiracies can be lumped in as one meta conspiracy, which is to keep the free thinkers, the stray minds, from exiting the world stage paradigm. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate the support. I got your, I don't see a message there, but I got your super chat there. If you scan the code on the screen, all that is doing is it's going into the think tank. And we're not exactly running on E. I mean, obviously I'm getting stuff done every day, but the next step is going to be jumping into an office space, maybe as early as this weekend. It depends on how fast they can get me in. So on the 21st is when I'm going to try to do it. And the purpose there is I need a stable workplace so we can bring in the books and the publishing again, and also set up desktop computers and resume the 24/7 feed. And I have more than 28 hours now of recent content that can go into the feed, including some content submitted by other content creators, which I'm open to. So if you have a podcast that you think is, or that is off-world stage or adjacent to, you know, auto hoax adjacent, I will happily throw it into the 24/7 feed. And I need to do that with the latest fakeologist. And towards the end, when I talked to fakeologists, I brought up this thing about getting into the timelines involved. So this has been something that's been ignored, and I think it needs to be focused on very closely. Because the newsbenders concept is pretty accurate. If you haven't seen newsbenders, it's pretty much how things work. But it's even more, I think, significant if you look at how newsbending never gets corrected. The fake stuff is never exposed as such. It becomes part of our historical narratives. And so therefore, we can look at our entire history as being warped. And what does this actually mean? And it all has to do with your current frame of reference, the consensus perspective. Like we all have the same perspective if we're adhering to the worldview as presented. It's not as uniform as it used to be, but it's certainly split. But even the most extreme divergences from the mainstream, like the UFO cults, the Bigfoot people, the people who are into like weird occultism, none of them go outside of the media generated worldview. It's kind of interesting how all encompassing it is. But now I was thinking about this thing with Musk. Musk saying they're going to eliminate poverty. Does anybody else here think that this is achievable in the way he's describing, or do you think he's just selling utopia? Because that seems to be one of their main things, is they sell us on either a doomsday or utopia. Like a few years ago, it was like the world's going to end from global warming in 10 years. We have to get to Mars. We're all going to die. It's like, whoa. And now it's no one's going to have to work in a few years because of AI. It's going to solve all labor shortages. And maybe you can do sports or music if you want to, but there's no reason to. I'm like, what? How did we just go from we're all going to die to we're never going to have to work again? It's going to be paradise. I'm getting whiplash. I guess it's whatever's going to sell. If you don't have a compelling enough vision, you can always just get them mad about the status quo. They're always prodding us. And that seems to be the point of the PSYOPs as well. I mean, it's very effective. I think there were like 600 people. I got to find the article, but there was like 600 people who were facing legal consequences for stuff they said about Charlie Kirk. You know, like people getting kicked out of colleges, losing their jobs, pilots being grounded. It's actually a thing. All right, so one other thing I meant to get to with the number of people. So I'm trying to discern if these are operations and they're creating noise, you know, what is the ultimate agenda? Aside from confusion, aside from giving the government controlled media plausible deniability, what's the point of these number counting channels that offer it as some kind of prophecy, even though they admittedly get it wrong half the time because they forget leap years? What is the purpose of it? Well, I think the purpose is ultimately what they're using, the method. If you're using Kabbalistic gematria numerology calculators to decode the news and fake events, then it automatically presumes the culprit. You're not looking at Norse runes. Oh, it's the people from Valhalla are controlling the media. Just use the Norse runes to decode it. You know, you're not seeing anybody doing anything other than Kabbalistic stuff. Looking at the symbolism in the context of, well, who do you think that the conspiracy theories want you to eventually blame? And the connections are real, but so are the misses. They're only focusing on the connections, and they're only doing it retroactively. They have no predictive capability. It is essentially a waste of time, but I think it's a distraction. And what it does is it adds noise to what we are doing. So what we're doing is not getting lost in the weeds, but we're examining the existing architecture of mass media as it differs from the public perception of it. Like, yeah, guess what? Media is not what you think it is. It's more conforming you than informing you, and always has been. Jason Brain said, I was trying to figure it out myself. I built an online calculator only because Wayne Gretzky reduces down to 9 with almost all ciphers. Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player. Okay, down to 9. Yeah, that's the other thing too, is you can make anything work, and you can make any celebrity's name appear meaningful if you're willing to do the work. And I think AI is making it very easy. It's not even good engagement bait. I'd rather look at AI slop rather than somebody's gematria slop. And it's not really insightful. So I don't know if it's schizoid or pretentious, or if it's some well-intentioned person who is falling for some mind games. But I get the feeling it's all mind games. But again, the purpose of it, because there are others who do this too, like what's it, Zachary Hubbard, the sports guy, the sports betting guy. Yeah, he's got the language of God, numbers. He can decode it very well. So he's got the divine language, and he can use it for discerning what's happening in the world. So he uses it for gambling. But anyway, gematria gambler Zachary Hubbard uses these things. But ultimately, what it does is it points to the usual suspects by design. I mean, that's why they're doing it. And I've been calling this out alongside the mud flood people for the same reason, because we're looking at people who are well-intentioned but entirely misdirected. And when I talk about bringing people into the off-world stage, who do you think we're aiming at? We're aiming at those who are seeking, not those who have settled into an ideology and are being spoon-fed. No, we're talking about people who are actively seeking answers. So like, I've never been critical of flat earthers, mud flooders, or whatever. I'm not critical of them. Like, I was disappointed that Jeranism became an anti-flat earther. I'm like, whether or not they're correct is not the point. The point is you have people who are actively seeking because they have a healthy distrust of establishment media. So you have this growing body of skeptics, and maybe they don't start off perfect, but over time they can improve. And if they start off that way, there's no reason to stop. And so I look at the mud flood as redeemables. I think the people who are seeking and are misdirected are the ones who can be redirected. You take away the guardrails, pull them out of the cul-de-sacs. There aren't many places to go if you're aware of media fakery and the phenomenon of predictive concurrent programming. And if it's explained in the right context and is demystified, I think a lot of people will see sense in what we're putting forth here. And this is the ultimate power grab. The elite prefabricating history and then performing it in front of us. And then it forms our collectively agreed upon worldview. I mean, it's genius in a way. I mean, it's achieved what religions have always aspired to. We live in a global one world religion. Now, when it comes to the gematria stuff, it's all like witchcraft, as in like when you're doing spells. If you're gonna do spells and magic, you're gonna come up with a temple name for yourself. There is this belief in the power of symbols, letters, and numbers as they communicate to the subconscious mind or the gods, however you want to look at it. But they do imbue these things with a great deal of meaning. And so if you want to have, let's say, a ritual when you're worshiping a goddess or something, in all likelihood, you're going to write out your spells in such a way that the sentences go down to the number 13. Like, you could use numerology to imbue your spellcraft and symbolism with additional meaning. That's how it's used. I don't really see it. I've never seen it used or described in any book as, you take these gematria calculators and you can, I don't know what they're doing exactly, but I've never seen it used outside the context of mysticism, is what I'm saying. They're just applying it to the news. So it's interesting, because the idea here was, as far as like when they teach this stuff from, look, I think the book is called 777. The idea here was that by showing the resonance or the consistent like relationships between related words based on their shared numerology, you are exposing the hidden order of the universe. That's the idea. You're showing how the scripture or the various scriptures can relate to one another through numerology. So it was really kind of meant as a form of mysticism. And even then, it's still pretty fallacious. But this group of people using it for news media are just intriguing to me. I think, where do they get this? And it got really big. It took a weird turn with QAnon, because the Q people would look at timestamps on Trump tweets and then apply those to Q drops. And the Q drops were only there for like a year or two. And so what they did is they would treat every day as relevant to that day's Q drop. So every Q drop has an anniversary. I mean, they got really weird about it, but they were like, Trump sent a tweet at 2:47, and Q drop 2:47 said, "Hello, Patriots." And they read all kind. Then they get into the other stuff, the names and the dates, and they decode these things. So it's like they're decoding secret messages from Trump, who's telling them about their war with the deep state. Now that sounds insane, right? Because it's objectively crazy. And I'm looking at that as noise. I saw the whole Q thing as noise. And when I say noise, I mean noise to signal. It's meant to drown out people who are making sense of this. And I talked about Space Cadets yesterday, that TV show where 10 people were in low Earth orbit, or at least they were hoaxed into believing so. And the show went on for 10 episodes. And at the end, you find out that 5 of them were actors. And what did the actors do? They helped to maintain the illusion. They helped to prevent the non-actors from forming conspiracy theories about how it's fake and they're not really in space. So you can look at the actors as noise generators, as creating a lot of noise in order to disrupt the people from possibly figuring something out. Jason Brain says it's all reactive, decoding past events through flukes and numbers. I do see it as a confusion. Yeah, it's 100% a confusion. And again, it's a distraction. And it's a distraction from an objective analysis here. Like we can look at the facts and the same facts and not introduce any of these other components. Like when it comes to predictive and concurrent programming, we have actually standards here. We have certain criteria. We're not just calling things fake because we want to call them fake. We have certain hoax indicators. We have quite a lot of considerations. So there's nothing just reactive about what we're doing. And what you'll see coming up as we get closer to the Super Bowl is these counts are always huge. You've got 500,000 followers because apparently 1 million people a day want it. I mean, that's crazy. How many people actually want to see this stuff? Why do these chemtrail channels have 1 million followers? Or these calendar people, hundreds of thousands of followers? Like, I don't believe the audiences are that big. I think these are artificially inserted in order to create this fog of Psy-War. But as we get closer to the Super Bowl, you're going to see them taking the Super Bowl date and then making correlations and predictions. And this is going to be one of the guys that I'm referring to. He was like, yeah, I want to apologize for saying that the last Super Bowl was going to be the last Super Bowl ever. Five says, it's just people noticing real patterns without a context to plug it into. Well, exactly. But what I see as problematic is, I'm looking across the street and I almost saw another T-bone. There's right across the street from me, nobody gets that stop sign. And I think it's because the mulberry trees block it. And I almost saw another accident. There was one the other night. Now, the thing is, you can retroactively create a pattern by selectively choosing things, but it's very arbitrary and highly subjective. Like, I'm not here saying that the number 4444 has special meaning or anything, or I'm just pointing out the ones that we do see. But these ones are operating under the premise that like 3 6s, 4 6s, or multiple 7s are somehow significant. And then to start off with the beginning of this conversation, the 16,606 days, like, I'm sorry, that's not a unit of measurement. They'll say 43 months. Well, why not just do the division, figure out how many years that is? So they're kind of cheating. Like, I was working with Chat GPT, and I said, how many days is it between Elvis's birthday and I gave him some other events, and I said, can you give me the numbers in sequences of sixes? And it said, well, if I'm able to go into more than 30 days a month. So for example, 66 days. Well, if you're saying 66 days, you could have just said 2 months, but that would have broken your pattern. So anyway, I'm just pointing out there's a lot of cognitive sabotage just thrown out there. But the fact that these channels are big is somewhat alarming, but it's actually an opportunity, because what I'm doing now is I'm going into their comments sections and I'm directing people to more sensible information. Like, here's the sensible conclusion to reach about this. So I'm like, hey, look at this Hulu character and Heads of State and compare it to Snake Eyes. And instead of looking at these connections objectively, they start running the names of the actresses through gematria and then looking at their birthdays and connecting it to, it just goes into some insane places where, again, all they do is they detract from the idea that this could be humanly orchestrated. So it kind of feeds in to the premise of doing numerology and Kabbalah numerology in the first place, which is demonstrating order in the chaos, showing the hand of God. Like, these connections are so profound, it proves divine order. So not only is this fallacious reasoning applied to media, but I think it's still fallacious applied to the more mystical interpretations. Imagine that. Imagine religions employing methods to screw with people's cognition so they think they're experiencing divinity or gaining spiritual insight. Are there any religious practices that aren't fraudulent? I mean, I think they're just archaic. All right, moving on. I've become very skeptical of late of the claims of religions in general. And I think that the main religion to look at is the mainstream, but I'm paying attention to similarities and templates. Like, if we look at some of these characters, like we did the other day on Trump or Musk, as composites, well, you create these composites for a reason, and it's not new. If you look at composite gods, and there's so many great examples of a god that's actually an amalgamation of previous gods. They merge them together in order to consolidate power. This is an ongoing thing. And I think this is what we've seen with media itself, this consolidation of power by consolidating worldviews across wider and wider areas. So everybody's coming from different backgrounds, different histories, etc. But news gives us a commonly agreed upon history. And I think that's the real purpose of it. It's the unifier. This is what puts us all into a universal worldview. Our shared belief in the news as objectively real. It puts us on the same sheet. But sometimes I question, does it matter? Like, if we really get to the bottom of it, is it necessarily bad? Like, does anyone here think that it could be for the sole purpose of maintaining peace through mind war? Like, maybe it's necessary. Is it actually barbaric, outmoded, unfair? Or is this the best of all possible worlds? Charming Anarchist says, popular science is the new universal religion. Yeah, because what science does, because you got science and then you got the news media, science provides the miracles for the state church. And I'm not saying I'm anti-science. I'm saying the popular science, like you're saying. I'm not talking about the scientific method. Science provides the miracles, and the news media provides the myths. Every religion has myths and miracles. You have its priesthood. And I think the space program is largely religious pageantry in its function, and that the rocket can be argued as really just an iteration of the obelisk, the symbol of the earth god that the cults center around, the sun. In fact, I was just watching, and I haven't finished it yet because it's a long movie. I'm watching that Frankenstein movie. I just got past the part where the tower exploded, and then he's reading from the Bible about Adam, and he wants his Eve. And there's even a mention there of the Tower of Babel. It's all really intriguing if you haven't seen it. I'm not through with it yet, so I'm not going to do a review just up yet. I've been watching House of Dynamite, and I think there's a good case to be made that we're looking at a pretty heavy nuke push right now, which is, again, analogous to the buildup for the pandemic. And so I do have one prediction, because I don't think it's an if. When they fake the nuke, since we're not all going to see it except on TV, what we're likely going to experience are lockdowns for fallout, especially if they do high altitude, because the higher altitude explosions will justify broader EMP fakery. Now, I don't know how they're going to stage EMP or how widespread it will be, but I certainly think we can make the case for lockdowns. And I think it's going to fit the predictable pattern that the pro-media, leftist leaning will all go into quarantine, and the right-winger MAGA types will go run around saying it's fine. And we'll have this big problem. But it won't be like last time where if you're media, you're essential and you can still travel. They might even enforce it. There was a movie about this with Nicolas Cage. It's called The Humanity Bureau. I think it came out in 2017. And the premise is post-nuke, everybody's locked down, and the equipment that you would need to determine how bad the radiation levels are considered contraband. So you don't get a Geiger counter. You just trust the media that it's not safe to go out. Well, somebody gets one and he finds out that they're all locked down under false pretenses because there's no threat, but nobody's able to measure it. Kind of funny. Imagine that. Imagine locking down a global population under a false pretense. Linda Curtis says, I think quick here. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, what's up, Tim? It's Busy 56.
What's up, 5056?
Yeah, Busy 56.
Oh, Busy 56.
Yeah, I was just calling. I wanted to talk about Shakespeare a little bit.
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, there's no way that Shakespeare was the person who wrote all those plays, and I really think it was a government operation and a meta script to kind of shape the English psyche, but it was also around the same time they were starting the British Empire, so really to shape the world. And if you look at the character of William Shakespeare, it's like the typical rags to riches story. His parents were illiterate, his daughters were illiterate. There's no actual, the only thing we have in his handwriting are 5 signatures, and it looks like a child wrote them. There's no letters he wrote to anybody. There's no record of a funeral or anything in Stratford when he died. But somehow, he's the most celebrated, learned guy that writes these crazy plays that have so much about law, court politics, Italian geography, and occult symbolism. So then there's people who think it's him. They're called the Stratfordians, William Shakespeare from Stratford. And then there's people who call themselves the Oxfordians because they think Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, who was a spy, a nobleman, and a poet, and lived the life that Shakespeare wrote about. You have shipwrecks, secret marriages, court scandals, exile. Some people think he wrote it. Some people think Francis Bacon wrote it. They're called the Baconians. Francis Bacon was very influential. He was a philosopher, statesman, intelligence operative, and he was really into scientism and as well as colonialism. And then you have Amelia Bassano. She was a noblewoman with Jewish and Italian roots, possibly connected to Venetian circles and intelligence, and she might have been part of this group. So I think it's like a big chance that it's like a writing group that wrote Shakespeare, kind of like a writing group of these aristocrats and
okay, now,
spies.
so this is intriguing because what I've been describing here is that we have our real organic history that happens, and then we have the historic events planned in advance that are implemented and essentially imposed on our timeline. So they're embedded into our history. So we're looking at the proactive creating of history, and this would require a bunch of plays, a collection of them. It would require a bunch of writers and the ability to execute these things in theater, which is in front of the news. So like the idea here that there is for all intents and purposes, a cabal of writers conscripted by governments for the purpose of establishing narrative frameworks and putting them into the public. Well, I think it would make a lot of sense through plays, but now through news. But yeah, I think you might be onto something because Joseph Atwill wrote a book on Shakespeare where, and I think I'm going to have to revisit it. I have the ebook where he kind of makes the case here that these books, that there's a subtext beneath it all. And he's the one who wrote Caesar's Messiah, suggesting that the power elite will create myths to get the public on the same sheet. And I think that might be something of an analogous set of myths for all intents and purposes, or stories.
Yeah, I actually have both of his books, and he's the one who pointed to let me know, like, in all this alchemy that's in Shakespeare. So, like in Romeo and Juliet, in the beginning, Romeo says, "I have a soul of lead," and then at the end, when him and Juliet kill themselves and are dead, Romeo's father calls the two dead lovers a golden statue. So Romeo's turned from lead into gold throughout the course of the play.
Okay.
And and you have that in King Lear. Also, Edmund the Bastard calls himself the base bastard, and he wants to basically inherit his father's wealth and turn himself into legitimate, so kind of base to gold again. And then in Othello, like, he's kind of like the moon, and he strangles his wife Desdemona. And they even have Othello being the Moor, so being black, and Desdemona is white. So it's very much the eclipse that ends in destruction, kind of like the Rosicrucian Masonic symbolism there. So.
Interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And this is like the kind of occult subtext that we even see in movies. Like, for example, Vanilla Sky, it's got Tom Cruise, but he's 33-year-old David Ames. And he dies, and then he has a 3-day funeral, and then he wakes up. And who wakes him up but Penelope Cruz? She's the character who plays Sophia. And in the Gnostic myth, Sophia has some great significance. But if you follow it, you actually see that it's essentially like Christ Magdalene, or God and Goddess. And they encode these movies with these subtexts all the time. So you can kind of tell that there seems to be some kind of indication that not only are we looking at our scripted media having propaganda elements, but you can kind of see the fingerprints of these mystery schools or secret societies putting their marks on it and their myths.
Right. Yeah, and then with Shakespeare, it's like all the history plays are basically nationalism, like flattering the Tudors and like inventing this glorious English past. All the comedies are mocking the poor as the clowns who like can't figure out the tricks and disguises of the elite. And then the tragedies make the audience sympathize with these rulers and great men, internalizing like the suffering of these kings.
Oh, interesting.
Universal. Yeah.
Because right now it's all no kings, and it's like I was talking this the other day. The various media representations of Trump from 1958 track down and on, Biff Tannen and others, they've always presented him as a tyrant and somebody who has in his future an assassination attempt, but they've built him up to be a villain. And I'm saying they do this in advance. And so it's kind of interesting you're referring to previously, it could be used to shape perception about leadership or the
Yeah,
authorities.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it just like kind of shows how this stuff, like they're kind of using the same script like over and over and over. And then John Dee is in this story as well, because it's in The Tempest, the main character Prospero is definitely based on John Dee. He's this magician and occultist, and there's something about John Dee trying to like use a spell to stop the Spanish Armada, which supposedly is what The Tempest is based on. And at the end of the play, he like puts down his wand, and that's the final play of Shakespeare. So it's almost like the character of Shakespeare putting down his pen, putting down his magic wand, and being like, "I'm done."
Oh, that's crazy. Now, I have the audiobook for The Tempest, which I want to listen to because the show The Tempest, which isn't based on Shakespeare, but I thought there might be some connections. And Tempest is where you get Brave New World. That phrase comes from The Tempest.
Yep.
And then you also got what hell's empty, the devils are all here. I mean, there's some great quotes out of that, but I want to listen to it because I thought there must be some connection. Because Erica Kirk was called The Storm. The Tempest is about a widow who takes over her husband's political organization after he's shot in the neck. So I thought there's got to be some significance to The Tempest in here. If I had known there was a John Dee reference, I would have read it by now.
Yeah, and there's a lot of dick jokes. Like all these plays have so many like sex joke, like definitely like sex magic stuff in there. And also a lot of these plays seem like they're about intelligence operatives, like all the comedies has people, there's all these like overhearings, everyone's being spied on and falling in love through like these deliberate misinformation campaigns in the comedies. There's a lot of cross-dressing as well, and there's like, which is kind of interesting because supposedly all men were in these plays, and like younger boys played the women in Shakespeare's time. So thinking about a man playing a character of a woman who's disguising herself as a boy, and then the man character is like falling in love with that character, there's a lot of kind of creepy overtones there as well.
Fascinating. And so what is your take on Joseph Atwell's book, and what is it called? I forgot the name of it.
I think it was like Shakespeare's Messiah or something. Yeah.
Something similar, but yeah, what's your take on the book overall?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't finish it, but like I read around. I think there's a lot of really good stuff in there, like Romeo's Soul of Lead and everything. Because what was his thesis on Caesar's Messiah? That it was created. Do you remember?
Yeah, with Caesar's Messiah, what he said was, in order to win over a large segment of, I guess, Jews to worship Caesar, they gave them a Messiah for their scriptures. Since they didn't believe in idols, they gave it to him in print. And so he suggested that Caesar essentially commissioned the Gospels to be written and had them. And I think he even claims that it was written by. He even has the names of those he thinks might have been involved in it. But he essentially says that these were myths created to unify the empire under the rule of Caesar by giving them a god that basically tells them to render unto Caesar, and this god replaces your old worldview, and now you should unite. So that's kind of what he's suggesting, is that the religion was planted there and then backdated to make it look like prophecies were being fulfilled, and that it was written in a way to fulfill prophecies as well.
Right. Yeah, and he kind of says a similar thing with Shakespeare, which I definitely think Shakespeare was created almost as a religion, and even today, like there's people who like Shakespeare is their religion. Like I went to acting school and I had a Shakespeare professor, and like at the mention of Shakespeare not having written the plays, like he absolutely goes berserk. And people take like pilgrimages to his house, Shakespeare's house at Stratford upon Avon and stuff, and have these like religious experiences.
Fascinating. Oh, it was Josephus. In Joseph Atwell's book, he suggested that was Josephus who wrote War of the Jews, basically wrote the Gospels or was commissioned to write them. That's what his contention was. Anyway, it's a fascinating take on it. And that's one of the things that got me looking at this idea of metascripting history, writing history in advance and presenting the events on the world stage in such a way that it becomes part of the accepted history so that you could fulfill prophecies. You can create the utopia in media and then lead people to it. And it seems like a foregone conclusion. So I kind of think that this is template, the creation of myths by the state for the purposes of mass manipulation. But today's myths we're getting through movies, we're getting through plays, not just the traditional religions.
Right. Oh, I just looked up my notes, and yeah, so I wrote down that Titus tricked in Caesar's Messiah. His take was like Titus tricks the Jews into worshiping Jesus, and then he said that Shakespeare would then fool the Gentiles into worshiping Shakespeare. So it's kind of like,
oh, okay,
like them get it. Like, so he thinks of Amelia Bassano, who was Jewish, is possibly one of the big manuscriptors, and the Jews, like he's saying, wanted to fool the Gentiles into worshiping Shakespeare because they got fooled into worshiping Jesus.
Interesting premise. Well, all the worlds are a stage, all the world's a stage, as you like it, and then Globe Theater. These are concepts that we've kind of pulled into our discussion of mass media because I think these are things that can be taken quite literally.
Yeah, and like in Hamlet, Hamlet gets the idea to use a play called The Mousetrap to lure his uncle, who he thinks killed his father, into and he's gonna watch his uncle Claudius's reaction to see if he feels guilty, because he's basically gonna reenact exactly what he thinks happened, which is that his uncle killed his father. So he's like, oh, the play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king thing, which is interesting. Like, I'm going to use media to fuck with my uncle so that he feels guilty, and then I'll know that he really is the guilty one.
Clever. Yeah, well, I certainly think that Joseph Atwell's books are worth looking at, worth considering. He also put out a pretty good series of videos, podcasts, and in one of his ones that I listened to recently, he was talking about Catcher in the Rye and the subtext in that book, and that one shows up in all kinds of assassins' hands. So it's like this interesting prop, a world stage prop.
Yeah, I read that essay that Atwell wrote on Catcher in the Rye. That was, it made a lot of sense. Sure.
Yeah, well, when I saw, I think it was John Hinckley Jr. carrying the book, I thought, okay, this is just too much. It's like too in our face, obvious. Or Lee Harvey Oswald had it in his hotel room.
Yep, it's in The Shining as well.
Okay. Yeah, well, Catcher in the Rye, according to Atwell, is some kind of Masonic calling card relating to assassinations and hits, and it tells the story of this secret society of killers that runs the world. It's kind of ominous when you get into it, and it does have some really strange elements in the book.
Yeah, for sure.
But hey, thanks for the call.
All right, anyway, I got to run.
All right, well, have a good day.
My pleasure. Thanks, Tim.
Interesting information. All right, so we're talking about the world stage. And the caller brings up Shakespeare and the works of Shakespeare as, I guess you'd call it, metascript, or essentially it's content, like psyop reinforcement, the movies. These things are all used to help put ideas out there. I mean, we're talking about the influence that movies and plays and books have on the masses. And there's no doubt they do. I mean, why do you think there's so much effort to putting propaganda messaging within the entertainment and the video games and anywhere where people are just passively open, receptive to information, mind viruses? What's up, Rick? Here's your wrench. Lord Laney says John D33. Lily Bell says interesting caller. Northern Girl says Otto hoax. Yes, I concur. Yeah, I got to read The Tempest now. I might have glossed over it in high school or something, but I think it might have some significance because when we're looking at staged events, you'll see that they borrow from many different sources. What's up, caller?
Hey, Tim. It's Psyop Sidecar, a.k.a. Nick Finger.
Oh, what's up, Psyop Sidecar?
Hey, glad I caught you live. I had 3 quick points I wanted to bring up, and then I'll listen offline. One, Erica Kirk, 1967 to 1971 Florida governor's wife. Looks exactly like the current one.
Okay, I'll look at that one.
Okay. 2, I wasn't around the think tank back when the whole Kyle Rittenhouse thing went on, but I hear you guys talk about it a lot. I was looking into it a little bit, just on a hunch. I'm a bar guy, know a lot about booze, and I asked ChatGPT in 2020 what the best-selling rye whiskeys were, and number 2 in the country was Rittenhouse Rye. So when people see that word, the word rye comes to mind. And then I went digging into what does Kyle mean, and it's an area like a bottleneck in a body of water where it's passing into another body of water. So like a place where you would put a bunch of fish nets to catch fish that are traveling from one lake to another. So it's like Catcher in the Rye. And in the book and in that, what 17-year-old boy holding up a rifle.
Wow, that's good. That's actually really good. Rittenhouse Rye, Catcher in the Rye, 17-year-old. And then he does have all the hallmarks of like a mind control shooter. I mean, Rittenhouse is a peculiar character, but yeah, I think you're onto something because I think Kyle Rittenhouse is also based on Chris Kyle, the sniper who went across state lines, Hurricane Katrina, and shot a bunch of looters.
Yeah, I heard you. That's when you started saying those things, it made me start thinking, and that's when I started looking at that other stuff. And then the last thing, I mentioned it in the chat the other day, but have you seen the what is the Economist year to come 2026 thing yet?
I looked at it and I'm gonna have to take a moment to actually decipher it, but it looks like a big ball of clip arts, and then somebody's like I guess it's the world, but I didn't go into detail.
It's on a soccer ball. It's on a soccer ball being kicked, and there's a lot of movement happening, and there's a lot in there. But the first thing that I noticed was Charlie Kirk with binoculars, a ways behind the back of Erica Kirk. I mean, maybe somebody else sees somebody else in those, but that's what I get out of those cartoons.
Yeah, I heard someone mention that. I'm going to look at it closely. I was looking at it today. I was trying to find the Charlie Kirk character, and I heard that he had binoculars. So, yeah, I want to look at that one. And what was the date that this art was created? That's what I'll have to look at as well. But,
right.
But anyway, great comments here with the Kyle Rittenhouse thing and the beer. I mean, that's typical for what we see. And I'm going to look at this Erica Kirk really quick from 1967 to 71, Florida governor, first lady, or governor's wife. I'll take a look.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy, and like they got married like just a couple days before he went into office. Like he was a single guy when he ran, and then like all of a sudden, and she's German born, went to migrated to Brazil, World War II era, and like her profession was an actress, but like she never really had any roles. Maybe that was her role. It was, I don't know, that whole those 2 characters, that governor, everything that I've seen about him today, he was somewhat of an odd fellow himself.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm looking at her. So we're talking about, wow, this to me, she just died 2 years ago at the age of 88. Erica, spelled with a K. I mean, spelled with a K, it's like, okay. Erica Matfield Kirk. Madam X. They called her Madam X. She was the wife of the 36th governor of Florida. And if you look at her, it does look like Erica Kirk has been modeled off of her, this Madam X. Very interesting.
Yeah, I thought you'd get a kick out of that. All right, I'm going to continue listening.
All right, thanks for the call. All right, I'm gonna look at this more in detail here, but we are looking at what appears to be like a template for Erica Kirk, Madam X, governor's wife. Very interesting. There may be something to this with all the talk of Erica Kirk as VP under J.D. Vance, which are, planted narratives. Yeah, it's unfortunate that there's a triple K. Erica Creech has a K in her name. She says it's a German name. I mean, the optics, though. Some of these politicians, I think, intentionally do try to model themselves off of previous successful politicians. Like, I'm pretty sure that, was it Hakeem Jeffries, the guy who's the Speaker of the House, the Democrats? He's got Obama's birthday. He talks like Obama. I thought, this has got to be Obama in a mask. This is way too close. But they deliberately mimic others who have done well. But yeah, that is a strange one. Flying Carpet says Macbeth's Witches Brew was COVID stew. Is that what it was called? Or was it Corvid? Someone fact check that. Somebody run it by Perplexity. Macbeth's Witches Brew. And there's a bit of a Macbeth subtext in the JFK assassination. Lizard legs, owl wings. Okay, I'm looking at it here, and 3 Scottish witches in Shakespeare's Macbeth were cooking up brew made up of the eye of a newt, frog, bat. I don't see oh, okay, the bat. But that's only if it's undercooked. By the way, there's a blog post that came out by someone you may have heard of. And actually, I was going to talk about bats, by the way. There's this influencer. His name is Tatum. And he put out an article today on his Substack about how the account of one of the guys who was there at CK's assassination debunks all the conspiracy theories. And I listened to the guy's account, and it's just brought this conversation back up. But they're trying to shame conspiracy theorists like they used to with school shootings. Like, don't call it fake, or don't question the official narrative. It's offensive to do so. So I'm seeing a lot of pushback against the Candace Owens conspiracy theorizing. But supposedly this guy's account of things would explain anomalies that people claim they've seen. I listened to it. I wasn't moved. He fake cried, or really cried, depending. What's up, Tunex? Thank you for joining. But anyway, he's like this. And this is this guy's blog post. He said here, I got the title of it: the interview that should end every conspiracy about Charlie Kirk's death. So I responded and I said, Charlie Kirk's not dead. I'm going to see how many people like that and how many people say, shame on you. People get crazy about it too. Like, how dare you say that's not true? I hope you get shot in the neck. They really get like that. Well, not these people, but the wrestling fans. They're pretty vitriolic. I was like, Psycho Stu is a crisis actor, and Reggie Jackson wasn't really punching him. And when I said that in Sean Strickland, the MMA guy, I said it in his Twitter video, and I got hundreds of just hateful comments. And some of them were pretty much death threats. Like, how about I come to your house, knock you out with a body slam, and punch you in the face 23 times? I'm like, what? Because I said that's fake? Since it's fake, and you want to do it to me for real. But I looked into that one because if you're not familiar with the story, Raja Jackson, son of Rampage Jackson, goes into a wrestling match and he body slams Psycho Stu, who's then knocked unconscious, and he gets punched in the face 23 times. That's the official story. Well, if you count it, there's less than 11 punches that actually connect. He misses. And so I'm saying, how does a trained fighter miss a stationary target right in front of him? It's because the angle of his punches were like swinging dramatically. And according to the reports, there was blood and teeth flying everywhere. Well, you didn't see that in the video. But anyway, looking at this thing, I'm thinking, well, why is the news reporting 23 punches when only 11 can be argued to have actually connected? So I suggest that maybe it was fake. And maybe that Stu was just swinging his head back and forth to correspond to Raja's fake punches to make it look like it. I even said it looked like he was fluffing the guy's beard. Like the beard was puffing up. So if you look at it closely, you'll see what I mean. But wrestling fans could not look at the slow motion video. They were just so angry that I said it was fake. Like, how dare you? I'm like, so you admit that wrestling's fake, everything else is fake, but this particular move is real because they said so? But looking closer at it, I thought, well, why would he have been knocked unconscious from a body slam on the canvas mat? So I did some research on it, and I was like, do body slams ever knock people unconscious? Well, generally in wrestling, they don't, because they land flat on their back and they're accustomed to it. However, in WWE, there are numerous famous examples of wrestlers pretending to be knocked out from the body slam. It's a gimmick, always has been. However, turns out that Raja Jackson's father got the name Rampage Jackson for body slamming an opponent unconscious during an MMA fight and continuing to punch him in the face. It's a recycled script. Now, I looked at the video of his father, and that was not a regular wrestling body slam. That was the guy getting slammed on the back of his head. To me, that looked believable. But this one in the wrestling ring with Psycho Stu, no, this was a typical body slam, a consensual body slam, where one guy picks up the other, hands on his hips, hands on his shoulder. You ready, bro? Yeah, let's do it. Then they like turn around and then drop the guy on his back. It was choreographed. You're not going to get knocked out from a choreographed body slam on a canvas mat. So no, that was provably fake. And I don't care if Sean Strickland's fans want to beat me up over it. Like, yeah, let's fight. Let's fight over that. And these are people who wouldn't, join the army and fight for their country. But no, they'll fight for WWE or wrestling. They'll fight to defend their ridiculous TV shows. It's crazy. It's just a TV show. They're not ready for the big picture. Like, if you're triggered by somebody saying that wrestling is fake, well, wait till you find out about everything else. What's up, Kenley? Thank you for joining. Diana Southard. And to me, that was a litmus test. Because I think when you look at these events, you can't solely rely on the visuals, because wrestling is nothing more than people who are very good at faking stuff on camera. So the idea that you'd be able to tell it's fake or real just on the visuals isn't enough. Although in this case, when you looked at the news reportage and connected it to the actual video, it raises some questions. But the wider context, including that of A, his father did something similar, or exactly, that's how I got his nickname. But B, I did some research, deep research on Perplexity, And I said, can you find me any examples of wrestlers getting knocked out from body slams? And it's like, no, there's no examples in the medical literature of somebody being knocked out cold from a body slam. And the guy didn't wake up for what, 24 hours? That's so phony. Andrea says, in World Wrestling, aren't they literally fighting over an oversized, bedazzled belt? Yeah, they are. It's just big. It is a oversized, bedazzled belt, big status symbol. Do you think says, besides the world stage and squibby guardrails, life is pretty good. I think these are what make life good. We're looking at the greatest show on earth. Like, I don't feel like the bread and circuses are necessarily oppressive. It might be necessary, like speed limits. You know, there are some things that we need in order to coexist peacefully. And it could well be that mass media mind control is a necessary safeguard against man's lower nature taking over. I mean, maybe we're just lawless and fickle. Ribo Nation says, sorry that wrestling fans hurt me. No, I assumed if they came over, they would punch, but the fist wouldn't actually connect. They'd be stomping on the ground. Like, I don't think they know how to really punch. They would stage punch me. And I'd fake it. I'd fake like I was hurting. I might even blade myself. Like Hulk Hogan, I'd have blood on my face. I would do that if it was like live. I could do blading. I could do a Trump. Busy56 says, Mozart is pushed as a genius so much with Amadeus now making new TV show of Amadeus. Well, the magic flute is well known to be a reference to the Masonic initiations. Well-known reference. Ribo's again, and look, it's not me that like I wasn't hurt by wrestling fans. I hurt the wrestling fans. Like I'm not sorry that I hurt the wrestling fans. If you're mad that I said that Psycho Stu is a crisis actor, I'm completely unapologetic about it. I have no problem with kayfabe. Everything is kayfabe. At least wrestling's honest about it. You know, there's a point where wrestling was considered real, and then they admitted they were fake. And I think they did so because it gave them some advantages when it came to avoiding certain sports regulations. There was some rationale behind it, and it was a smart choice, business-wise. But might we get to a point where we have a similar revelation about news and sports and politics? Like, by the way, yeah, it's kind of dramatized, and it's for your entertainment. Oh, Sam says, I think wrestler Owen Hart faked his death. Which one was that? I mean, I heard of the guy who fell. I don't know how you would fake that in front of an audience. Unless, I mean, I don't know. I mean, hyper-realistic simulation dolls are very advanced today. You know, there are dolls that bleed, that talk. There are wearable, like, arm sleeves filled up with fake blood so you can bleed. Like, if you look at these modern mass casualty drills for EMTs, they're gruesome, but it's because of the training value. Oh, Sam says, died at the Over the Edge event exactly 1 year after Batgirl dies in an episode Over the Edge. Yeah, I rarely talked about that one because there's no real footage of it. And I've read into all the accounts. I've gone deep into the Reddits. And what I found are some people are saying it happened at a point where it was like right after a commercial, lights were low, and they played it off really quick. So it just seems like we don't have a real consensus over what was seen other than he fell 100 feet and then they kind of push it off to the side so they can complete the show. It had to do with, like an accident with the clip. But is that fakeable? Well, we're talking about wrestling, nonstop magic shows. How would you fake it? It would have to be some kind of I imagine, a dummy. But the problem again is that we're talking about in front of a live audience, so it gets a little tricky. But I don't know. I would have to see video. I don't know enough. In other words, I don't know. And if you say you know, what's your evidence? You heard about it? The bloody guardrail really gets people. If you say there's a death, then its believability just shoots up like 80% in their minds. It's like, oh, well, yeah, it's probably true because somebody died. What's up, Spirit? Thanks for joining. Diana Southard said wrestling is like ballet, choreographed. Yeah, well, it is. It's definitely choreographed. It's acrobatics. And when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, I think it's pretty respectable. I went to a circus last year. No, it was earlier this year. This paranormal circus. It was kind of like a regular circus with acrobats, but it had this like satanic Halloween zombie theme to everything. But the acrobatics were just incredible. The performances were unbelievable to me. And when I look at these wrestlers, you know, you're looking at some pretty skilled individuals. I have nothing against it. Oh, Sam says, we have a strange coincidence in the dates. All I'm saying was he was masked like Batgirl. Also, at the end of the episode, it's a dream. Batgirl's not really dead. Yeah, Over the Edge, all these things tied in. It looks like that. It could be. I mean, it also looks like horrible PR. But it wouldn't shock me. Like when I hear about people like, for example, Macho Man Randy Savage, who was featured in some vintage 9/11 predictive programming about demolishing the Twin Towers, he and Hulk. You know, he died in a Jeep accident or something. And I thought, well, maybe the company, the World Wrestling Entertainment, maybe it would prefer that these idols they create these gods so they can be immortal. And maybe they don't want them to age badly in public or die less than in their prime. Maybe there's chance, you know, in other words, if you want to preserve the character for all time, maybe the characters are written off the world stage and then they can go live somewhere, you know, off the grid or whatever, get some kind of makeover. But it might be in their best interest for these characters to die as legends. Oh, what about Hulk Hogan's death? Anybody think there was anything weird about that other than the timing? There were some things in that I thought were strange. Just because of Hogan's attachment to the Butler, Pennsylvania psyop. And it puts his whole ear thing in a different context. His signature move of holding his ear, you know, so everybody can scream louder for him. Well, it kind of has some foreshadowing when you look at Hulk Hogan's role at the RNC following the Butler, Pennsylvania shoot and his reference to blading. If you didn't watch that, he's like, enough is enough when he tried to shoot my president. A reference to the Illuminati playing card Sniper with Trump on it. But during that talk, he describes how looking up at Trump with blood on his face reminded him of Hulkamania when he had blood on his face and Trump was in the audience looking up at him. And then Trump blew a kiss at him. One WWE Hall of Famer to another. So I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, wait, Hulk Hogan is comparing a staged event where he cuts himself to bleed on camera, looking down at Trump, to Butler. Is he saying that Trump cut himself? That he bladed himself, WWE style? That's what I took out of it. Ted Stryker says, but my wrestling, yeah, no doubt. Oh, Sam says he was definitely dead in popularity, got booed to hell in the Netflix debut of Raw. Yeah, Hogan. Yeah. Well, we'll look into this too, now that I think about it. When we do this 9/11 breakdown, I'm going to have to clear the desk here and use the entire whiteboard to start getting into the 9/11 predictive programming and associated characters. It gets really in depth, but there's a pretty apparent pattern here. As I was saying with Trump, for the most part, the representations of Trump in media and entertainment have all foreshadowed 9/11 and or Butler. So it's not just that he's existed in entertainment in the form that he recently attained as president. You know, he's in his Biff Tannen stage. It's not just that it's like the movies are borrowing from this colorful character, but it's that in the way they characterize him and represent him, it represents his future self as we've seen him as president. And it specifically correlates him with 9/11 before it happened. And it connects him to Butler. Ribo says Twin Towers was a tag team, the boss man, the Georgia cop, and a 450-pound guy known as One Man Gang. Yes. So they were talking about taking down the Twin Towers. It was going to be dynamite. They're going to explode. But that's the way this kind of works. You know, you look at these things, we're taking things that it's like, are we taking it out of context? Well, no, not really. We're looking at product placement and the target demographics for the incoming PSYOP are rendered suggestible to it with a lot of the entertainment content they've consumed. It's like conditioning. They're built up to it. And the reason why is that the events that we're being prepared for are historically significant events that they need you to just accept as real. Busy 56 says, from Shakespeare to WWE to Frankenstein to reality TV, the Metascript sure covers the gamut. Yep. You could even call it Metascripture. I was thinking about how scripture and religions, and we're talking about like scribes of the gods, the authors of our world, the creators of our world. It's similar to Sutter Kane. If you think about In the Mouth of Madness, his role. So in The Mouth of Madness, John Carpenter, another must-watch movie. We will have to add it to our list. But it's about this author whose work becomes so popular. He's like a Stephen King type. But he sits up in his castle and he's just typing, writing these books, and they become so influential that they overtake religion, the Bibles, and the people who are consuming it have entered into this shared parallel reality. Sort of like the fictional universe of mainstream media, or how all the conspiracy theorists are in a shared alt reality. I mean, look at the people in Woketown, Trutherville, Normieville, Q Street. They live in different realities. So in The Mouth of Madness, as Sutter Kane has put people into his fictional universe. It's kind of H.P. Lovecraft inspired, like Lovecraftian, where there's this mythos, a body of works that all have the same fictional universe. And what happens is the main character is investigating this author and he finds him, and he has become the dominant influence over worldview. That's the point. But in the movie, the reality itself actually conforms to consensus belief. So it's not just that we've internalized illusions, but they become externalized and the world goes insane. And supernatural elements become real. So it's a horror movie about reality inverting or altering to reflect what people are reading. But what's kind of revealing at the end of the book is that in order to protect himself from the world gone insane, he isolates himself in an insane asylum. He commits himself. He voluntarily commits himself. And that's where you hear the story as he describes how he meets this author. And the author in the castle is on a typewriter sitting in front of this wall that has a crack in it. And behind that is just pure chaos. So it's kind of similar to the Bible, where you have the chaos, the void, and then the word, and then God, creates, speaks, let there be light. Only this is like Sutter Kane is taking creative control over reality. But at the end of the movie, he exits the insane asylum and he's walking around and he goes into a movie theater and he sits down and now he's watching a movie of his own life, and then he starts laughing and losing his mind because he realizes he was in a movie the whole time. I think that's the revelation. And this is John Carpenter, They Live. So obviously he's a meta scripter. He fully understands the role of media, and it is almost like aliens have taken over and put us into a massive illusion. Oh, Sam says, wild that Linda McMahon was Secretary of Education. Yeah, I think it only makes sense, honestly. Busy 56 says, Leonardo DiCaprio's production company is going to be producing Oz, a documentary about the making of The Wizard of Oz. I'm going to likely watch Wicked. I'd be remiss if I did not. I watched the first one, and it was Antifa coded. Oz was basically Trump, a fascist, xenophobe, or I don't know what you would call him, but they were purging the animals, the talking animals. And the whole thing seemed to be like animal rights, Antifa versus fascism. And at the end, the witch flies up into this. Oh, the witch, by the way, they make a deal about the color of her skin. So it definitely has these elements that it's a very woke leaning Antifa film. And at the end, the witch goes up into the sky, lightning and everything, like electromagnetic pulse. She EMPs Oz, the Emerald City. So the Emerald City goes blackout, goes dark. And I thought that's intriguing because Seattle is the Emerald City. So it seemed like some foreshadowing. And the movie ends at the blackout abruptly. That was part one. So part two comes out in a few days. And I may have to go see it for research purposes. If you want to contribute to the popcorn that I can throw at the screen or consume, depending on the quality of the film, there's a scannable code right there in the middle. Kevin Morgan says 28 years later, the Bone Temple 2026 new movie. Happy 11/19 all, says Elford Yinglet. Yeah, well, we haven't had any major psyops. I mean, really anything significant this week. It's been slow. They've been focused on Epstein. These things just come and go too fast. Like we're still dealing with the fallout of CK, and then the death of Cheney kind of got swept under the rug by something else, Erica Kirk's pants or something. Then the plane crashes. By the way, I think Dick Cheney's funeral is tomorrow. And I had suggested that maybe his body was on the plane and it was a 9/11 themed Viking send off and he was cremated, but apparently not, because there's going to be a funeral tomorrow. That took a while, right? He died on the 3rd, which is the day the One World Trade Tower opened. And 17 days later, he's having a funeral. Unlike Charlie Kirk, who died, and then they had a coffin ready to display the next day so J.D. Vance could write it on 9/11 and make a big PR stunt about it. Like, that's a pretty quick turnaround from assassination to autopsy to embalming to delivery to the service. I mean, that's pretty quick. All right, so I think we've been covering a lot of good ground here. So just to reiterate, Erica Kirk, governor's wife, Florida, 1967 to 71, known as Madam X, appears to be the template for Erica Kirk. Kyle Rittenhouse, the number 2 beer at the time of the riots was Rittenhouse. And the name Kyle essentially means rye or catcher. The Kyle's the area where you catch the fish. So there's a catcher in the rye reference. Another, again, the 17-year-old with the gun, if you've read the book. And then the Economist cover. If anyone's seen it, the Economist cover seems to have Charlie Kirk on it with binoculars. It's worth looking at. There's a great a deal of magazine covers that just have predictive content, foreshadowing. They're practically all being used for that purpose. Atlantic's big one, The Economist, Time, as we've pointed out. Busy says, I know you talk about Charlie Sheen being in the news the same time as Kirk, the exact same time. Charlie came out on September 10th, and that's the day he was on Rogan talking about Lee Harvey Oswald. Also, Louis C.K. also got a lot of press and wrote a book at the same time. Oh, Louis C.K. Right. And then you had Alejandro Kirk. Yeah, so it was Rittenhouse Rye Whiskey. Fascinating. Well, what we're describing here is that when you have these events, these psyops, you tend to have what I call psyop reinforcement. But it's not limited merely to the movies, but you'll see it popping up in headlines unrelated. You'll find it popping up in sports, in other stories that are conspicuously given a lot of attention to. It's like there's this echo chamber effect with the memes. So that's why when Charlie Kirk comes out with America Comeback Tour, Charlie Sheen shows up on a comeback tour. Same day, 9/10. So 9/10, Netflix #1 thing is Charlie. And then you look around. That's why I say you have to decompartmentalize how you process media. It's no longer news, entertainment, sports, games, literature. When you're looking at the stuff that reaches the masses, you're looking at something closer to the source, closer to the media monopoly itself, the PSYOP entertainment complex, where at the very top level, top tier propaganda conduits, you're finding consistent messaging coming from this same source. So the same themes, same characters, same ideas are going to be showing up in a number of different contexts. But what unifies them is not just the content itself, but the synchronization of it with the fake event. And when we're saying fake events, again, this is bigger than a PR stunt, bigger than a fake news item to score political points or something for some agenda. No, we're talking about historical events. They're faking history event by event. And the real stuff exists in the echo chamber where the fake stuff is treated as real. So you can see how the fake stuff, even though it's the minority in terms of the number of stories compared to the quote real stories, everything exists in the same echo chamber. So no, I don't think the Charlie Sheen thing is a coincidence. And then if you watch the Joe Rogan, again, #1 podcast, they're talking about not just JFK and Lee Harvey Oswald and the advent of the conspiracy theorist, which again, this is all being given a reboot. But Charlie Sheen talked about getting sniped, while watching a movie. Somebody threw something from the balcony and hit him in the eye. And Joe Rogan said, great shot. But we looked at the general theme as well, all around, like Ryan Routh attempting to stab himself in the neck with a pencil. Well, if you look at the courtroom illustration, the place where he was about to stab himself was the exact spot where Charlie Kirk was shot. What are the odds? Another shooter, again, this guy was going to try to shoot Trump. The point of the pencil at the same spot in the neck. Like, what are we actually looking at here? We're looking at concerted messaging, or Americana, where somebody gets shot in the neck. Well, the title of the show, Americana, and that very specific place in the neck certainly correlates with Kirk, TPUSA, America Comeback, MAGA. It all refers to Americana, a nostalgic view of America, traditional values, etc., and then shooting that in the neck. Kevin Orrick says, Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn talked about conspiracy theories on his show. Right. But of course, these individuals are like Candace Owens. They're part of the media infrastructure, and what they call conspiracy theories are the approved counter narratives, the approved conspiracy theories. And they all have the same structure, the same template, and they never begin with the idea that the media is lying. See, that's the irony, is that the truthers begin with the premise that the media is telling the truth. They're telling the truth on what they showed us, but then they're lying about it. So that's their error. You have to realize that they can lie to you with the visuals. You know, you see people being critical of, oh, these people are just falling for everything AI. Well, what's the difference between automatically believing something that you see in an AI clip and automatically believing that what is televised is essentially real, that this is objectively real? No, there are simulated events. The historic events are simulated. Their performances in the theater of Saiwar on the world stage. So at the beginning, we were talking about noise and distractions, and how we're the only ones who aren't distracted. And this is, I mean, mark my words on this. This is the only worthy conspiracy that we should be talking about. No one is talking about this because this shatters the world stage. You can't have utter belief in the world stage as presented and also have this other perspective, which is the major historic events that steer our collective worldview are not only staged, but by all indications, they're decades in the planning. And that should be a hard reset on your worldview and how seriously you take a lot of these things. Alfred says, just saw Roofman. There was a reference to the storm in relation to the butterfly effect in his relationship. Guy falls in love with a woman who looks like Erica. Yeah, the storm thing is a consistent one. So if you go back to Snake Eyes, Hurricane Jezebel, they call it the storm. They say, call it a storm, because they didn't want to scare away people from going to the boxing match. Tyler, the executioner, Charlie Kirkland killed, shot in the neck, and September. It said September 19th. It looked like 10th, but regardless, the consistent elements in all these movies have storm, very specific shot in the neck, and the name Tyler consistently brought up in all of these, and of course the Kirk name. I mean, even Vice President Kirk in Heads of State that just came out, she gets shot in the neck, and the actress is the one who was next to Charlie Kirkland when he was shot in the neck in Snake Eyes. I mean, if you really look at these connections we're making, these aren't cherry picked. It's not selectivity bias. It's just like, for example, someone said, oh, look, there's a VP Kirk in this movie that just came out. Well, I didn't even watch the movie. And then someone else watched it and they said, oh, she also gets shot in the neck. Oh, that's significant. And then someone else is like, by the way, it's the same actress who was next to Charlie Kirkland when he dies. So we have one hit, and you look closer and there are multiple others connected to it. So in other words, our model has some level of predictability here. Tomino, it says, Day of the Jackal, 2024, Charles Calthrop, billionaire tech entrepreneur activist who became the Jackal's target, directed by Brian Kirk. Now, I haven't seen it. The Jackal's Target. I'll take a look. And someone showed me a picture of a book by James Rowland where a politician's giving a speech and the bullet whizzes by his ear. The storm stuff is very consistent on the right. And I think it started with Dylan's Storm Roof. Storm is also a reference to what was like a white nationalist thing. But storming the Capitol, or Donald Trump ominously saying this is the calm before the storm. When he said this is the calm before the storm, and the media are like, what storm, Mr. President? He's like, you'll see. Well, what do you think he meant? The whole Q movement was built around the storm. And then the Capitol gets stormed, and none of them made that connection. You know, the 33-year-old Jake and Jelly, the QAnon shaman, Q sent me, runs with a spear into the Capitol with his roadkill vest, and he sits on Pelosi's throne. It's like that was the storm. I was actually looking at January 6th as another event that we could reverse engineer in terms of what is the buildup to that particular date and that theme of storming the Capitol. And we haven't looked at this one enough. And, you know, I'm wondering if Mel Gibson, because Mel Gibson, I believe, is a major metascripter. And I think he might have had a hand in Butler based on the PR shots that Trump took and their resemblance to the Braveheart poster and Mel's association with the QAnon movement in general, with Jim Caviezel being from Passion of the Christ. There's quite a lot with Mel Gibson in this area. But I even think that you can look at the freedom shirt worn by Charlie getting shot in the neck as maybe a reference to Braveheart as well. Trump was called Braveheart by the New York Post when he shows up in Butler 84 days after the event. And again, the fist raised, the flag behind him, the flagpole, it aligns with the Mel Gibson movie, Braveheart. But in Braveheart, there were scenes with large numbers of people fighting it out on the battlefield, you know, swords and spears and arrows. And it's just like medieval warfare. And I was thinking, if anybody could have had a hand in directing January 6th, it would have been Mel Gibson. There was a lot of Braveheart there with the patriots and the flagpoles, very dramatic, fighting in a big mass. Because that was a staged riot, if you didn't know. It was staged. The people who were there at the Ellipse were 45 minutes away by foot from the Capitol, and they were still listening to Trump speak when the riots had already started. But anyway, if I had to guess, but I've been looking into it. And the 1/6 thing, January 6th, 1/6, seems to even show up in Waco, where the raid that preceded the incineration was over 1.6 million rounds. And so I've been looking into this. And in 2020, that was a constantly, that meme was constantly being used, the 1/6 thing, like Dominion sues Fox for 1.6 billion. I mean, I have it mind mapped out. What we have done is we have mind mapped a lot of these events for common elements, repeated numbers, repeated themes. And I'm going to go through my mind maps as we build out our history benders. I want to find some of the best examples. I want to mind map it out into a format to where I could take a 30-minute talk to a newbie and explain our premise for suggesting that major historic events are A, staged, and B, planned decades in advance, which leads to C, the implications. And that's the part that I don't think anybody wants to deal with, because it's kind of a buzzkill to say that you have no real power in politics. It's just a steam valve, that all the major events of your life have been largely fictitious. I mean, politics isn't fake. There's real stuff. Obviously, it's local, but the big historic events are the things I'm talking about, and they do impact everything else because it's a closed informational system. So in other words, we're describing what seems to be sort of a soft totalitarianism at best. I mean, there might be a darker element to it, but at a minimum, it's not black-pilled. You know, we're still looking at people stuck behind the bloody guardrails who can't get past the idea that deaths are being faked in these events. But once you get past that and you can recognize the theater of Psywar for what it is, it alleviates a lot of the stress and fear, doom and gloom that a lot of people take for granted. If you haven't read it, go to ips.monster. There's a link for Handbook for the Recently Deprogrammed, A Skeptic's Guide to the Theater of Psywar. I have to deliver some art. I've been using Facebook Marketplace to sell my art. It's also on eBay, but that's one of the things I'm doing at the moment. to fund everything. And it looks like I actually have made some progress with eBay. I have bidders and watchers on all of my paintings. You can go to timosmond.art if you're interested, but I'm actually looking for more eBay sales than local. But what I'm doing is I'm listing these things locally, and if somebody shows interest, I'll go over there and save myself some packaging materials and labels and stuff and just deliver it in person. Meet up in a Starbucks or something. So I'm going to go make an art delivery. It's like Uber Art. But we'll continue this conversation in Discord. There's a lot of research in there I'm still poring over, and I'm publishing articles now regularly, again, as I should have been doing anyway. So I want to say thanks to all of you subscribers at the timosmond.substack. So what I do there, as opposed to the other Substack where I mostly send out archives and notifications, over there I go into a bit more detail, and I have articles, Autohoaxology 101, but I go into more detail here, like predictive programming as evidence of scripted history, Erica Kirk, Heads of State Connections Part 2, and so on. Tons of articles here. I'll put a link in the chat if you haven't been there. And the books that I put out, like for example, the handbook for the recently deprogrammed, a lot of the ideas that went into it were preserved by putting them into blogs, because we have a lot of ideas. We have a lot of viewpoints, and we discuss these things relentlessly. So I like to put our ideas down in the blogs, and then every 6 months or a year, I'll go through the blogs and see if there's enough there for a publication. Speaking of which, I have a series of publications in development called Metascripted, where I will be going character by character and doing the breakdowns. That's one of the reasons for these whiteboards. All this stuff is going to go into print. Diana concurs that Mel, yeah, I think Mel Gibson likely was involved in Butler, January 6th, a lot of the Q stuff. And I think the Charlie Kirk had a hint of him as well. I mean, what they're doing is they're hiring the best directors, and always have, to participate in PSYOPs. I mean, this goes back to John Frankenheimer, who was directly involved with the RFK event and the Kennedys, but he drove RFK to the Ambassador Hotel where he was killed by a mind-controlled assassin. And this is the Hollywood director who wrote or who directed Manchurian Candidate. So it's a hell of a coincidence, but just one of many examples of this direct hand-in-glove relationship with Hollywood and politics. But it goes beyond just putting messages in movies to influence people one way or the other. It actually goes into the wholesale creation of historic events, movies presented as real. That's really what we're looking at. It's fascinating. Like, it's not alarmist as far as conspiracy theory goes, but this is the only real conspiracy theory. Prove me wrong. But all these rabbit trails that are being constantly fed to truthers lead nowhere. Certainly not off the world stage. Part of the intention behind these things is to alienate you from the other side, because they want that split. But ultimately, the red pill conspiracies are a bridge to far right, woke right political engagement. And if you're getting engaged in politics, what are you doing? Like, I mean, it's fine if it's entertainment, habit, whatever, but really think about, if you've already accepted the premise that events are being faked regularly and the politicians are all complicit, then you can't really look at it as separate from the PSYOP entertainment complex. And so to treat it as real or anything other than a steam valve, I think might be a waste of our bandwidth. So people talk about distractions. That's a distraction. And again, you're welcome to, I'm not telling people what to do. Like, if you want to participate in politics and religions and stuff, that's all on you. But I'm trying to get a laser focus on the task at hand. And the task at hand has already been laid out for us. We've got the puzzle pieces. Like I said, the normie truther types, the alt NPCs, they take a puzzle piece. Hey, look, this is a piece of a puzzle. It's a conspiracy. And then the next day they drop it and pick up a new one. We've been following these patterns and putting these puzzle pieces together, and we have arrived at something here. We have some framework. So now we're just getting into the details, getting into the weeds. And I want to amplify our efforts by bringing more people into the conversation, because there's people with time and resources and energy who are, stuck in the mud floods or busy with gematria calculators and other forms of mystification of what should be rational parsing of the facts. All right, I'll see you all in Discord. If you go to ips.monster, I put links. All the relevant links are there. If you're not in the Discord server, you're missing out on cutting edge research. And again, we're maintaining a focus. Our only rule there is no mainstream media advocacy, not even to be devil's advocate, because we're the devil's advocate. You're the media advocate if you're devil's advocating against the off-world stage perspective. Because again, we're confronting a closed informational system. And if your perspective originates from in there, your output's very predictable. In other words, it's programmed. You've got NPCs and alt NPCs. And by NPCs, I mean people who are going with the program who have effectively become extras in a video game, extras in a simulation. Diana says, we live in the one world order. Exactly. It's already here. It's not coming. Bad news or good news, depends on how you look at it. I'm very optimistic. And again, Pope Elon says that AI is going to make our lives easier and we're not going to have to work after a few more iterations of ChatGPT. So that's nice. Again, it went from we're all going to die because global warming, and if you don't get in my rocket ship to Mars by 2030, humanity will go extinct. And now he's like, you won't have to work in a few years. And there'll be some very neat video games to occupy your time. So bread and circuses is going to continue unabated. You don't have to worry about planet killer asteroids or climate doom. Although the AI destroys the environment, I mean, it seems to me, I've been told that the AI is using up a lot of our water. So I don't know, it kind of seems like a catch-22.